What's up, guys? This is Frankie with DIY Auto Tune and AMPEFI, and today we're going to go over something pretty cool. You may have seen the release of our MaxSpark kit for the LS engine, and today we're going to go over the install of that on Jerry's 67, 68, whatever year Camaro, because we're not entirely sure, because it's half fiberglass, but that's okay. Regardless, it's a red Camaro. So we're going to go over the install of that, but right now I'm going to unpack the box as you would receive it in the mail. So let's go over that now. This is how you'll get it, minus labels and things of that sort. There's a part number on the front. But yeah, it's gonna be packaged up here. Let's get it open. Okay, so in the box is gonna be pretty simple. You're gonna have both side harnesses. They're gonna be labeled. This one is the driver's side, as you can see on the label. Hopefully you can see that. Then you'll have one passenger side. It says it right there on the label. You'll get 8 AMPEFI MagnaCore spark plug wires. This is going to be sort of the DIY part of this install. You'll receive some fuse holders, some split loom, and some heat shrink and some other things to set up the DIY part of this install. But yeah, this will just be labeled a wire kit. You should have one of these in the package. Here's the hardware kit for the brackets. And then 2 AMPEFI brackets. And then obviously 8 IGN 1A coils. And this is basically going to complete the whole kit. I'll get some close-up shots here so you guys can see it, but let's get to the install. Should be pretty quick and easy, so let's get to it. Okay, so we've gone over everything that's in the kit. You get your coils, you get your brackets, you get your spark plug wires and your hardware kit, your wire kit, and obviously both plug and play harnesses. I got some close-up shots of that. I threw it in there somewhere. But yeah, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna get ready to do the install on Jerry's Camaro. Like I said, this is kind of a toss-up on what year it is. Jerry, I think, said it was a 67, but it has 68 fiberglass panels on it or something. Regardless, it doesn't matter. It's a red Camaro with a bone stock LS. It's a 6-liter out of a van. This is kind of a project test car for us, so it's nothing special yet, but maybe we might do something cool with it down the road. But as of right now, we're just going to do the install of this MaxSpark kit. So let's get into it. Follow along. Obviously, the documentation is listed on our site, so if you at any time need to refer to that, go ahead and do so. But yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so first things first, like in the instructions, is we're gonna take the stock coil brackets off with the coils, the spark plug wires and everything, just gonna come off in one unit. But before you do that, disconnect your battery. This is super important. I mean, the likelihood of damage happening is low, but it's still there. So just disconnect your battery completely. That's what I do. It's safe, and we want to be safe, so just go ahead and do that. This is a race car. Again, it has a battery cut off on the back, so pretty simple for me, but for you, go ahead and take the terminals completely off the battery. We want to be safe here, so just go ahead and do that. And let's get into getting this stock bracket off. It's super easy. All you're going to need is maybe a 10mm or an 8mm, depending on the engine you have and the bracket setup you have, but most OEMs are going to be 10mm or 8mm. So let's get these off the engine and get the new ones on. So, okay, so like I said, you're gonna want a 10 or an 8mm socket, and it's super easy to take these off. So again, make sure that your battery's disconnected. First thing I'm gonna do is just pop the spark plugs off on the spark plug side, spark plug wires, I mean. Oh, Jesus, these things are just falling apart. Just pop these off. Disconnect at the engine harness side. Tuck that out of the way. And then you're going to take off 5, in this case 8mm bolts. Okay, all the hardware is off, and it's just as simple as picking up the bracket with the spark plug wires on it, and you take it off the car in one whole unit. Super simple. Let's get the pretty ones on now. Okay, just like in the documentation, we're gonna set up our coil brackets off the car. This just makes it a little bit easier, just like you can install, just like you can uninstall the LS stock coil brackets, you can install these as one piece. So what I like to do is I come through and I put all of the coil packs on here, so that way it's ready to go, and all we have to do is bolt it to the valve cover. So like in the documentation, it may be a bit confusing, but you want to get your hardware out here. The 25 millimeter or roughly an inch long hardware is the hardware you need to mount these coil packs to the bracket. Every bolt in the kit gets a washer, so you're going to need a few washers. And I specified in the documentation that when you go to install one of these coil packs, you have to slightly lift the bracket off the table. And the reason for that is, if you can see here, there's a little bit of a gap. You just want to lift it off the table in order to avoid cross-threading or any kind of binding when you go to screw the bracket down. I'm sorry, screw your coil pack down. And I just get these sort of just finger tight, so that way they're installed. And then we'll go through and tighten it down with a 5 millimeter Allen key wrench. So let me get the rest of them on here, and we'll go through and just tighten them real quick. Okay, so we got these just basically just held on finger tight. You're going to come through with your wrench, and like it says in the documentation, there actually is a torque spec that we do recommend. I'll be honest with you, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it's very light. My recommendation to you is just remember that these are stainless steel going into aluminum, so you don't need to hammer these down. You just need to make them just barely tight. There's no method to this madness here, you just a little tight. That's it. Simple as that. Now your coil packs are mounted to your coil bracket. This is ready to go on the engine. What you're gonna wanna do now is just rinse and repeat on the other side, and you'll be all good. So let's move on to the next step. All right, so now we're here with our, basically our put together brackets with our coil packs mounted to them, and now we're ready to install it on the engine. This is kind of my favorite part because it's shiny and it's like, you know, cool. So anyway, like I say in the documentation, you want to start at each corner of the bracket. This way the bracket is being held onto the valve cover while you're threading in the other bolts. It just makes it easier. You don't have to sit there and hold it and fiddle with it. It takes a little bit of kind of wiggling around, and, you know, you'll see. But basically you just want to start in each corner. So I like to just take the bracket in one hand, grab a bolt. Each bolt gets a washer. There'll be 5 bolts per side. You just start in one corner. You don't have to thread it all the way in, just grab a couple threads so it holds it there. There you are. Now the bracket's just being held on the valve cover, and we can start threading in the other bolts. Okay, now that you got those threaded in by hand, you can take your 5 millimeter Allen wrench, and again, this is stainless steel hardware into a cast aluminum valve cover. So you do not want to hammer these down, you just want to do a light pressure. The torque specs for this setup is in the documentation. We gave you 3 different types of torque specs, but you just want to go barely tight. Little half grunt, and you're good. Don't break your valve covers, because I'm telling you not to. Thanks. And there you have it. The brackets are mounted to the engine, and now we can move on to the harnesses. All right guys, so we got the brackets on the car and we're ready to get these harnesses on here. In the instructions, basically everything is based off the driver's side. So everything in the instructions, everything in the documentation that you see on our website, everything is based off the driver's side, and we just have you rinse and repeat the same thing onto the passenger side. I'm gonna do the same thing on the car just for basically to keep consistency across the board. So we are gonna start with the driver's side harness. One thing that you will note is they are individually packaged in the box. There will be a part number that says driver, and there should be a tag on each harness, and the tag will have the part number as well as the person who assembled it will initial it with a sticker on the tag. Another way to note, which is a pretty simple way, is it's evens and odds as specified in the instructions. You'll see coil 1 here, and then there will be 3, 5, and 7 on the driver's side, and the passenger side is going to be your even numbers. So we're going to start with the driver's side, and we're going to throw this on the car. I'm telling you guys, this is like butter, super simple, pretty hard to mess up. The only thing that you guys have to worry about is the DIY side of the harness. We'll get to that when we get to it, but we're going to go to the PNP side of it now and get this thing on the Camaro. So let's go. All right, guys, we got our driver's side harness here. I go ahead and leave this bundle zip tied up. It just makes it easier to deal with for right now. When we get to this part of the install, we'll get those zip ties off. But for right now, just lay it in the back there, we're all set. So there's really only one way that this harness can go on. We made it pretty foolproof. But what you want to do is you can just take a look at the structure of the harness and kind of see which way it's going to land. It's going to land somewhat like this right here, with the long side in the front, short side in the back, obviously. You just go ahead, plug in your coil 1, plug in your coil 3. These all go in a row. It's going to be 1, 3, 5, and 7. Plug in your coil 5. Plug in your coil 7. Make sure you hear that audible click. These do have a really tight weather seal on them, so you just want to make sure that you hear that audible click. And then you just take the engine harness side, plug it into the ignition harness. Okay. I like to get this tucked, so let me move some stuff around. Okay, so we're all plugged in. We're ready to rock and roll, basically. We got to hook up our ground here, which we'll go over here in just a second. But that's basically the gist of this plug-and-play harness. It's pretty much that easy, and it will fit on your factory harness. This is an LS drop-on harness that we offer with the MS3 Pro Ultimate and the MS3 Pro Evo. But this will fit your factory harness. So we left enough length in it, as you can tell, to be able to pull it back, just like this, and zip tie it out of the way. Just so that way, if you want to keep it clean, nice OEM looking engine bay, or if you've got a nice race car and you want to make sure that you get it nice and pulled back so it's nice and clean, we made that an option here with how much length we added to this harness. But we'll get some close-up shots of this so you guys can see, and then we'll keep moving with this install. Okay, so due to where the ground attaches to on the back of the cylinder head, it's gonna be pretty hard for me to show you on camera. But what I will do is I will put a picture in right now from the documentation. This is the back of 2 cylinder heads. I did a passenger side and a driver side from an LS engine. You can pick any one of these holes that's convenient for you. Most of the time there's already some hardware there with a bracket mounted to it, or possibly another grounding strap of some sort. So you could use that. You just want to make sure that you make direct contact with the cylinder head. As long as it's direct contact with the cylinder head, you should be golden, you should have a good ground. So it's a little hard for me to show you. I'm gonna hook it up off camera, but like I said, I inserted some pictures. I'll do it again now, and that should be enough information for you guys, I hope. Let's keep trucking. All right, now we can get these spark plug wires hooked up. Hopefully this is obvious, but the black boot goes up towards the coil, and the red boot goes down towards the spark plug and the header. I did say this in the documentation, but since these engines are in all kinds of different cars and all different kinds of setups, you might need some sort of heat sleeving, maybe some heat tape, or having your headers wrapped or something like that to avoid any contact with the spark plug wire. But it's hard for us to determine that without seeing the setup, but these are high heat nonetheless, so just try to keep them off direct contact with the header. But let's get these on the engine and then we'll hop over to the passenger side as well. Okay, spark plug wires are installed. This does take a little bit of effort, so you're gonna have to push them on there. You'll hear an audible click at the coil side, and you will hear an audible click at the spark plug side as well. Just make sure you give a nice little pull on it, make sure that they're nice and attached. All right, so the PNP part of this install is done. It's as easy as that. Mount the brackets up, put the wire through, pull it all through how you want it, bing bada boom, and it's done. Now what we need to do is get to the DIY portion of this. We're gonna go over what's in the wire kit here in just a second. It's very basic stuff. Every car is gonna be different on where you pull power from. We do have some recommendations in the documentation, so please make sure that you read the documentation. I believe we recommend for the fused switch 12 volts that you will need to trigger the relay. I think we recommend using the fuel pump for your car. Since we're gonna be doing this in a race car, it's gonna be really easy. There's a little fuse panel off the side on the passenger side of the vehicle that kind of has everything I need. So it's gonna be really easy for me, but we're gonna kind of go through it the best that I can. I'm probably gonna run some of the wires off camera and just show you how I did it real quick, because I think most of you guys can handle this out there because you're awesome. So anyway, let's just get into it. We're on the home stretch here. So let's knock this out. Okay, so this is the wiring kit that you're going to receive with the MaxSpark kit. It's actually labeled as wire kit. So once you get it, you can open this up. You get 8 foot of split loom. This is the Tech Flex that we use to actually make the harnesses themselves. So you get 8 foot of that. You're going to get 2 fuse holders here. Those are going to be used here in just a minute. You get a nice little length of adhesive heat shrink. And then here's another small pack. And in this pack you get your fuses. These are 50 amp fuses. These coils do require a lot of power, so 50 amps is correct. These are your 2 step-down butt connectors that we're going to use to attach this to the MaxSpark harnesses that are now on the Camaro. And then we have our 2 ring terminals that will go on the other end. These will actually connect to your battery power. That's what this is for your battery power. Now, we didn't include any ring terminals for the switch 12 volt part of this install. The reason why we did that is because depending on how you install the switch 12 volt, it could be with a ring terminal, it could be butt connected in, it could be spliced, it could be soldered in somewhere. So we kind of just left that up to you, but this is everything you will need to get that battery power hooked up. And then however you decide to run your wiring, you will have a nice length of Tech Flex split loom to finish that off and make it look like a complete install. But I will walk you guys through this on the Camaro. Like I said, the Camaro is a little bit easier than your standard car, since everything here is kind of wired into a panel that we have on the passenger side of the car near the kick panel. So it's gonna be relatively easy for me here. But we do recommend in the documentation, like I said, to go to your fuel pump power. So yeah, let's get to it. All right, guys, so we're here on the inside of Jerry's Camaro. I just finished up the wiring for the MaxSpark kit, so we're golden. Everything works great. I got the car fired up, everything runs great. But basically I kind of wanted to just go over kind of what we did to get to this point. I'll throw in some clips here to try and better explain it. First things first is you need to mount your relays on the firewall. We found 2 existing holes in this firewall. Again, this is a project car for us, so there's a lot of tinkering and playing with that we've been doing, and we also use this for testing pretty much everything that we come out with for an LS platform car. So we found 2 holes existing on the firewall, and we used some hardware here we have at the shop and bolted the relays up to the firewall. Now, we've done an install on several cars here, and we've actually had luck with using the plastic trim snaps to hold in plastic in an engine bay. We've used those to install the relays, and they tuck up nicely and you never see them. So if you've got an engine bay that's closer to an OEM style, you could get away with doing stuff like that, or you can just go ahead and mount them to the firewall using some hardware or existing hardware that's already there. Next, we ran the wires for the relay, the constant power and the switch 12 volts we ran through the firewall. Now, the way I like to do this, just to keep it simple for me, and maybe it might work for you as well, is there's 4 wires that we have to run through the firewall. It doesn't sound like a lot, but when you already have thick wiring harness, we've got a bunch of wide bands for every cylinder on this engine, as well as exhaust gas temperature sensors as well. So for feeding through the firewall is a little bit difficult when you have 4 individual wires. But so what I do is I like to either run some tape around it in you know, every foot of the wiring, or every 10 inches or so on the wiring, just run a piece of tape over it to make it into its own little sub harness. This makes it a lot easier to feed it through the firewall, and that's what I did here. I used some small zip ties we have here in the shop, and it made feeding it through the firewall super easy. So that's just a not so pro tip for you guys, and hopefully it helps out getting that bunch of wire through the firewall. And in this setup, since we were coming to the same spot regardless, I combined them into one harness and ran it to the same spot, and it's super easy. If you guys are splitting off and going somewhere else just out of convenience, you could always do that with just the 2 wires per relay, or you can feed them in all 4 wires and then split it off as after you get through the firewall. Then what we did after that is we determined length here inside the cabin. So that's going to be something that, again, is completely different for everyone. For us, we ended up with maybe 2 foot worth of wire under the dash, probably less than that. But what you're going to do is just pull it through the firewall, get all of the slack out of it, and set it on the floor. Find out where you're going to be running this battery, or these cables to, rather, and you just pull out the length. And I like to add at least a few inches in length to give you the opportunity to tuck it out of the way. Also, you have to remember that for the battery, the constant 12 volts, we have the fuse holders that we need to crimp together using our step down butt connectors. So you have to realize that you're probably going to be adding at least another 8 inches or so to the length of whatever you cut. That's something you're going to have to be conscious of as you're setting it up, but nonetheless, it's good practice to try and pull it, figure out exactly how it's going to bolt together, where you're going to bolt it together, where you're going to hook it up, and then you can just add a few inches to the wire and cut it to length, and then set it up for your specific setup. As far as the switch 12 volts, again, in our documentation, we recommend going to the power source for your fuel pump. If you don't have something like that, you just need to go to a good fused ignition 12 volt. Here, I just went straight to our ignition switch that we have here in the car. Again, this is a race car, super easy. And it's okay to double up on those as long as they're getting the same signal. You don't necessarily have to install them with separate terminals, or separately solder them in somewhere in the car. You can connect them together on the same terminal and have them activate from the same switch 12 volt source. All right, guys, so this wraps up our install of the MaxSpark ignition system for the LS engine platform. Hopefully this made sense for you guys. Obviously the PNP part of it is cake. We made it that way on purpose, but the DIY part is going to take a little bit of thinking and planning out, depending on what car you're wiring it into. But I hope this helped out. Again, reference the documentation anytime you guys have any questions. you can always reach out to our support team, and we'll answer any questions that you guys have. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you love the products. Again, reach out, follow us on Facebook, on Instagram. We're trying our best to post new content as much as possible. But yeah, anyway, we'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks again, we really appreciate it. All right, see you later. You guys didn't think I was actually gonna leave you hanging and not start this bad daddy up, right?